Is your image too large or perhaps in the wrong aspect ratio? Perhaps you have a series of images that are too dark? Do you want to add a company logo to your product's images? Or perhaps you want to add a drop shadow to an image? All these operations and more could be achieved using Tangora's powerful and easy to use image editor tool, which will be the subject of this video. We'll jump in with a scenario where we've just added an image to a page and the image belongs to a category that hasn't affected the image's dimensions. But the image is too large and we want to otherwise adjust the image. We'll see a cool thing, and that is that we could record the adjustments that we make to an image, so we could apply the adjustments to a single image or even a whole category of images. But let's get right to it and get an overview of Image Editor. First, we'll look at the topic of resizing images. So I've just added an image to a page which belongs to a category which hasn't resized my original. But it's too big, so we'll need to do something with that. What I could do is I could right-click on my image and select Edit Image. And then I come into Tangora's Image Editor. Then I could hit the Scale button here and select a new size in pixels. When you're working with the web, by the way, you'll have to get used to thinking in pixels, which is an absolute dimension that can, however, be represented in various sizes depending on your visitor's device or browser. But as you can see here and in various other contexts in Tangora, you can see the results before you publish your content, so you'll never be left guessing. Well, I've just shown you scaling your image, but there's also an option to crop an image. If I take a selection, we could see that we have three options. I could either make a free selection, and then I get this frame here which I can move around and adjust. And then if I hit crop, I get the results up in the window. And now I could either save if I were happy with this, or I could just close the window without saving. And if I regretted my maneuver, I could also undo with the back button up here. I could also lock proportions if I just needed to take a bit off the edges or something, but it was important to retain the same relative dimensions. And finally, I could choose a user-defined value in pixels. Now I could drag my selector around and the end result will be the absolute pixel dimensions that I chose. But notice that you may be upscaling the image, and there's a warning box down here which appears when your crop will result in an upscaling, but disappears when you're safe. Okay, so we've just seen some options to resize an image using scaling and cropping. Next, let's take a look at what we could otherwise do with your image, including making various adjustments and adding effects. We'll also save our image, and we'll do a save as, which will be relevant when you come in a situation when your image is used and its dimensions are locked. So now we'll have some fun. You can see that you could rotate your image here, and you could flip vertically and horizontally. Under the Adjustments tab, you have the ability to adjust brightness, contrast, and saturation. While you're working, you'll have the ability to preview the results before you commit, but then you also have multiple undos at your disposal, which I'll also use here. Under the Effects tab, we have a bunch of effects, and I'm not going to demonstrate each and every effect here, but let's take a look at a couple. I could add a watermark, for example, which is pretty cool. I'll add a logo image that I have lying around here, and we can adjust the X and Y positions. Let's take the bottom right-hand corner, and then add a few pixels to add a little space here around the edge. I'm using the preview button here frequently, as you can see, and then we have opacity that we could adjust as well. If your logo is a bit bigger than you wanted, remember that you could simply adjust your logo's size using Image Editor, maybe making a copy of the image using our built-in Save As function. Maybe I wanted to add some rounded corners. And another thing you could do here is add a shadow, and under this category is actually also various reflection effects as well. Here, note that your image is actually resized as a part of the process. Now I could save my image at any given time, and the window will close and the image will appear on my page. But note here too that I could also save as under the Tangora button menu, where I, by the way, have some options to choose a color palette, and I can adjust JPEG compression, which will affect the quality and file size inversely. But let me choose Save As, and you can see that I'm prompted to give a file name and a name, which is the image's alt text, which is used by screen readers and search engines to identify your image. And then I could choose an image archive and a category. So that was the fun part, but now let's get into the nitty-gritty and address what happens to an image whose dimensions already are set, or if there is a macro that has been applied to an image. Yes, so on the subject of saving as, I want to tell you that if you want to edit an image which is registered as used by the system, you'll get a warning up on screen that says that the image is in use, and Tangora will prompt you to create a copy of the image. If you have an image that isn't in use by the system but belongs to a category where the pixel dimensions are set, then you'll get a variation of the same message. In both cases, you could choose not to create a copy via the save as, but then all the operations which would affect the dimensions of your image will be disabled. So now that we've also tackled the subject of what happens when your image's dimensions are locked, let's take a look in creating a macro, which is a routine that you could save for later use, and then we'll see where and how you could use a saved macro. Okay, now I'm ready to create a macro. I did a save as in the previous demonstration, so now I'm going to return to the image in its unmodified form to continue. So now we'll make a macro which resizes to 300 pixels, adds a film strip effect, and a drop shadow. First I'll go to the Macros tab, and then I could just hit Record. And now I just navigate to where I want to make some adjustments. And when I'm done, I'll just hit stop. And now I'll give the macro a name. And now it's saved for later use. Let's take another image that hasn't been modified in any way and apply our macro to this image. All I have to do is right-click on the image, open Image Editor, navigate to the Macros tab, and then hit Play and choose the macro of my choice. By the way, if I ever wanted to change my macro's name or clean up in macros that I've created but don't intend to use, I can navigate to Design and Layout to the Image Macros section, and here I have an overview of my macros. Notice here that there are also some predefined system macros, and then I could get into a macro's properties to rename or delete, provided that the macro hasn't been used in a category. Let's take a look now at applying a macro to a category of images. I'm actually going to hop into my image archive now and into the categories area, and then I'm going to find a category that I created earlier called Eye Candy. Now I can see that this category has resized images to 300 pixels on upload, and we can also see that the category is locked to prevent inadvertent changes to images that have already been uploaded. So now I'll go ahead and unlock the category and then select under Image Editing the Run Macro option, selecting the appropriate macro. And then when I hit OK, all the images under this category have been affected. Also, if they've been used on pages or in layouts or whatever. So that's pretty much all that you need to know about using Tangora's Image Editor. We've seen that Image Editor gives you quite extensive control over the size and appearance of your photos, all in an easy-to-use point-and-click interface. To get the full power out of image editing, you'll also want to make sure that you're up to speed with using categories in your image archive. In this video, we've been using the tool in the context of page editing, but you could also access Image Editor while you're working in layouts or in modules as well. Thank you for watching.